Hi, so this lecture is going to talk about how to go about taking a web page and setting it for a two-column layout like the one you see before you. Currently, this is the file that we're working with. If you don't have this file, please download the data files that are required for this current module, unzip the zip folder, and locate the folder for the lighthouse. Inside there, you'll find an index page. And here's the index page that you see before us, as well as the code over here on the left-hand side. I'll take a brief moment to go through the HTML code, and then you can see that I'm going to link to a separate CSS file for us to put all the code inside of there. In this particular example, and for most websites, there's enough CSS code that it should go into a separate file. That way many pages could link to it versus you putting it up into one portion of one page inside the style tags. All right, so getting started in the HTML side, you can see that we have ourselves the body tag and a wrapper. So the wrapper is going to basically go from the very beginning of the page all the way to the very end of the page, and you can see that the wrapper closes down here with the closing div tag. Inside the actual wrapper, we have the header, and so the header is going to have the Lighthouse Bistro. This is similar to the Java Jam assignments that we've been doing. Then we go into the nav section, and within the nav we also have now going to be an unordered list. So once again, similar to Java Jams, the actual anchor tags that are there are still going to be there. However, we are going to wrap them inside of list items so that way we can have more control over the display of our navigation bar. Our navigation closes, then the main opens. At this point, we now have a new HTML5 tag called section as well as article. Now at the very top here, I'm going to take you back up here. Our section is not being displayed. The display is set to none. So none of this content is currently being displayed in the actual web page over here on the right hand side. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So we're going to bypass that code and go all the way down to where the main opens, and the very first thing that we have right here is the image tag for the lighthouse. And that's what we see up here at the top. Following that, you can see it's a series of H2 tags and paragraphs, H2 tags and paragraphs. The main closes, the footer opens and closes, the div for the wrapper closes, and then the body and the HTML tag close. So it's pretty straightforward of an HTML file. Just as a reminder, make sure that you're always closing any tag that you open, which includes your body tag as well as the HTML tag at the very bottom. All right, so moving forward, we're going to create ourselves a new CSS file. Again, this is what mine has been called. If you'd like to call yours something differently, then please do so. You can modify the name that's listed up here, and then of course, make sure that you have a blank CSS file with the exact same CSS name. So to get started, one of the first things that we would like to typically put in the top of our pages is going to be that border box or the box sizing tag with the wildcard. Again, the wildcard always has to go as the very first line of the code. So we're going to do box sizing, colon, and then border dash box. And once again, to repeat, what this border box does is it basically states that there's any containers that have borders, as in the physical 1 to 3 or 4 pixel border, or any kind of padding which happens on the inside of a container, the border box basically says don't grow your container based on the border and the padding. Rather, the size of the container will be inclusive of both the border and the padding and not grow on the outsides of it. All right, very good. So again, you're not going to see any changes if we were to save and refresh after making that style up there. We don't have any borders, as you can see, or any kind of padding currently because there's no CSS at this point. All right, next thing we're going to do is let's create our body tag, and always open and close your curly braces up front. For this, we'll do a font family, and we'll do a Verdana, an Arial, or a sans serif. So a block letter style font. All right, and then we're also going to modify our background color. So background dash color, and we will specify a hashtag 00005 and then D as in dog. and save the changes. At this point, I encourage you to save and then come over here and refresh. We want to know that our page is actually working and that our changes are working. If at all, when you are in your CSS, if you are missing a semicolon, when you look at the rest of the code, for example, you'll see that this is purple in color for my display, this is purple in color, but now the next declaration is not purple in color, which is a telltale sign that there's typically a syntax error on the line before it. So things like that are great things to pay attention to. And again, save and refresh as you go. So that way you can identify or debug an issue early on versus waiting till later when you're trying to figure out where the issue actually occurred. So the next thing we're going to do is create ourselves a wrapper. As you know, this dark blue is near impossible to see any content on top of there. So we are going to modify the background color for it and set it to a very light color. You could go with white, or in this case, we're going to go with a light blue. So B as in boy 3, C as in cat 7, and then E as in elephant 6. And make a semicolon. And then we can always come over here and refresh the page. And there's that light blue color. All right. So moving on, let's also modify our font color. So we'll press color, hashtag, and then we'll do 006, which is technically 000066. So we're going to make it a bluish color, okay? And then we're also going to specify our width to 80% for the wrapper. All right, when we specify the width to 80%, we always know that we're going to go back and give ourselves some sort of margins that allow us to have flexibility of the container being centered on the page. So in this case, we'll do margin dash left and do auto, and then margin dash right and do auto. And some might say, why not just do margin auto? And you could, except I don't want there to be any chance that the browser would interpret any kind of extra margin on the top or on the bottom, whereas I do want that to occur on the left and the right. So those are the only two that I'm going to allow to have that auto. Now the next thing we're going to do is, if I show you here, when I grow and shrink my page, the content can get pretty small and pretty large, right? And so the next thing we're going to do is create ourselves the min and max width of the page size. So once again, inside of the wrapper, we'll do min dash width, and then we're going to do 960 pixels, and then we'll do a max dash width of 1200 pixels, px. Remember, there's never any spaces between the value of pixels and then the number before it, or a percent sign, or etc. Like you see the 80% up here. Never provide any spaces in between them. All right, so that's keeping us going with the wrapper. The next thing we're going to start to modify is going to be this Lighthouse Island Bistro. As you recall from the code, and if you don't, please pause and go back or flip over to your index page. This H1 is sitting inside of a header container. So we're going to go into header. Once again, I'll open and close my curly braces, and inside there I'll tab over. I encourage you always to tab over for the content that is within there, and then to have the brackets on separate lines where we're getting a nice alignment between the opening tag, such as you see in line 3 for body and the closing curly braces in line 6. It's very obvious that they've been open and closed. A lack of a curly brace will basically break the remaining CSS on the particular page. All right, so let's do the background dash color for our header, and for this one it's going to be a hashtag, and then it's going to be 869, and then D as in dog, C as in cat 7. Alright, so that's the background color. Let's change the font color, which is again just the word color, and we're going to do hash, and then we'll do 00005, and then D as in dog. And then let's save this and make sure that our changes are working always. So we've saved it, so now we can see what's happening here. So the reason why it stretched out was because we modified the min and max width, and so therefore at some point it's not going to let us get any smaller. Bear with me, I'm trying to keep it so that way you can see both my code as well as the page as well as the PowerPoint here. So you're seeing it take up the whole screen, whereas your display obviously is going to be slightly different on your own computer's projection size. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is increase the font size for our header. So font dash size, and we're going to set it to 150%. Okay, so this is 1.5 times of the standard font size that we have. Now think about this though, inside that header is the H1. The H1 comes with a predefined font size of roughly 24 pixels. So the Lighthouse Island Bistro currently is larger than the default font size of about 14 pixels, but because we're saying 150%, it's basing it off of a relative understanding of what the H1 size is by default. All right. All right. So, oops, I said fonder. I meant to say font size. So let's save this and refresh. And so now you can see how large that actually is being displayed right there. All right, next thing is that the content that is inside the header here is very close. So let's increase our padding. So once again, we're going to come in here and oops, let's go on to the next line. We'll do padding, colon, and we're going to do this all around. So let's do 10 pixels on the top. Let's do 10 pixels on the right. Let's do 10 pixels on the bottom, and let's do 155 pixels on the left. And so you will see in just a little bit, we want to make sure that we move things over for none other than a background image. So now we see this over here. All right, in my folder that you downloaded, in your Java Jams folder, in your homework folder, whatever you put in for a background image has to be located in the same project folder, okay? So we'll do a background image, and as you know, with the background image, it's the colon and then URL and then left parenthesis. Now, if you have your images in an images folder within your Lighthouse project, then you'd want to make sure you put images / and then the name of your picture. I have it right there in the Lighthouse folder, so there's no point or no need for me to specify a subfolder that does not exist. So we'll do Lighthouse logo is what it's called, .jpg. All right, so then we'll make sure that we put the semicolon on the outside of that. And I'm going to forget on purpose to put the repeat business there. And now you'll see that it's going to continue to repeat itself. Okay, so not a big deal. We're going to go back in here and say background dash repeat and then say no dash repeat. Remember, when it comes to CSS, there's never spaces between your words. You're always just putting dashes in between there. And so now we can see that it'll just be on the left-hand side over there, and the color matching of the gradient goes perfectly into the background color of the header. All right, moving along, let's talk about this main content down here so we can start to move things over, and then we will work on our navigation bar. So when it comes to the main content, so let's go down and choose our new tag for main. Open and close those curly braces. Inside the main, let's make sure, and we all know that main, section, article, header, footer, nav, and div. Those are all block level elements, but because of unknowns of what browser is actually looking at these web pages, we want to make sure that main is displayed as a block level element. So we'll just basically take it from the obvious and the default and ensure that all browsers will view it as a block level. There are variations between browsers such as Internet Explorer, Internet Explorer Edge, old versions, current versions of Chrome, Firefox, and then obviously if you're looking at stuff from a mobile device or a tablet, there's many different browsers to choose from. So we like to obviously make sure the obvious is specified. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is also give our main a background color. Now I start with the background color because it helps me understand how big the container is. So I'm going to do FFF, semicolon, and I'm going to save it and refresh it, because this helps me understand the allocation of space. Okay, so now you can see, obviously this is the nav up here, which is being picked up with the background color from the wrapper. We haven't identified anything for the nav. And then all this right here is going to be the main section, and then the footer is at the bottom. All right, so let's continue on into the main area. So let us, and again, we're going to start, I should probably switch over to my PowerPoint over here. We're going to create ourselves a basic 2-column layout. So as you can see in this little picture here in the PowerPoint, on the left-hand side is where the nav is located and where ours is going to go, and the main is over here on the right, okay? The header's up at the top and the footer's at the bottom. The nav and main are 2 separate tags, as you can see in the code. The header opens and closes, the nav opens and closes, the main opens and closes, etc. This is currently how your Java Jams is also set up as well, per chapter 2, 3, and 4. So you are in good shape to making your Java Jams website, like the Lighthouse, a 2-column layout. Okay. So that being said, we're going to specify our font color to black. So 000. All right. Now, the next thing we're going to do is I would like to actually come out of the main container and let's jump down to doing the nav, okay? So we're going to come back to the main in a second, but I kind of want you to see how this is all unfolding, not necessarily tag by tag, but how you might go about logically creating your CSS. All right, so we've talked now about floating, and floating basically says move a container over. Now, up to this point, we floated one thing, and it was the image, and so the image comes with a specified size, and so we've not specified a width before, but for this example, for the nav, we do need to specify a size. So let's give our left side navigation a width of 150 pixels, okay? Now, I'm also going to give myself a background color of something hideous, and I'll change it in a minute here, but I want you to see the differences between the containers. So let's do with like a red, so like F00, and again, we're going to remove that anyway, but I want you to see what it looks like. So let's come up here to the top, and now you can see that this is 150 pixels. The background color of the nav container is like this. Obviously, if it was staying up there and I wanted it to be prettier, I would increase my padding, etc. But it's not going to stay there. So in order for us to get it to go to the left, which it already is, ooh, that was fun. It's already on the left, but I really want all the main content that's in here to go up next to it inside of this area over here. So we don't tell main to float right. What we do is we tell nav to float left, and then main will move upwards, okay? So let's tell it to float left in the nav. All right, so there we go. That's as hard as it gets. The nav is now on the left-hand side and the main is now shifting upwards. Now, what you can't see is that the footer is also moving upwards, etc. And we'll tell those to clear out the floats, but that's how we create the 2-column navigation. Now, to ensure when a person changes the resolution or brings it smaller or larger, we also need to go back and say, you know what, at no point should this main content go on top of the nav, okay? An overflow might be your first thought, but that actually doesn't fix the problem. What does fix the problem is we come back to main. Now we just identified the width of the navigation being 150 pixels. So back in main, we say, you know what, let's ensure main doesn't go on top of nav by saying there's a margin dash left. So remember, margins are on the outside of the container, and we're going to say it's 155 pixels. And this guarantees that there's no overlap and there's a 5-pixel border. Even though we did the box sizing at the very top, there's no potential overlap happening there either. So let's refresh this. All right, so when we refresh it, we now see that this is the nav up here at the top with the red background, and this is then the rest of the wrapper's background color that's showing through right here, and then this is all of the main right here. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into our main section now, or we're still in the main section, and we're going to increase the amount of padding inside of there because, again, locally supported or roasted and special items, they're touching the border of the main container. So now we're going to go back into the main and choose padding, and let's just do around the clock 20 pixels, so to speak. And so all 4 sides will take on that padding on the inside. And so now it's starting to take some definite definition and look and feel that we're looking for.